Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you're new. Thank you for taking time out of your day to check the video out. We have more PlayStation news, rumors, and leaks to go over and cover here today. So do me a favor before we dive into these topics. If you end up enjoying this video or finding it informative, be sure to leave it a like. And if you are new here to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well. The first thing I want to talk about is PlayStation VR2 as it's finally officially launch day. So I want to ask you, did you pick up PlayStation VR2? And if so, have you played it yet? Let me know what your experience with PSVR2 has been like so far for those who have played it. I'm definitely going to be interested to read what you guys have to say. We're seeing Sony kind of celebrate the launch, putting out some new trailers, announcing a bunch of new games, just hyping it up in general. I'd say that the launch feels where it should be, right? I mean, I don't think anybody's expecting PSVR2 to have the same type of, hype surrounding it as a brand new console like the PS5 or anything like that. That would just be unrealistic. But generally speaking, I'd say that the excitement surrounding PSVR2 is right where I would expect it to be. But moving to the next topic, we actually are continuing to talk a little bit about PSVR2. This is coming from the official Resident Evil Twitter account, and they say, dive headfirst into the world of survival horror. Resident Evil Village VR mode for PSVR2 is available today as free DLC for Resident Evil Village. Resident Evil 4's VR mode has also begun development. Stay tuned for more updates. And they have confirmed that Resident Evil 4's VR mode will in fact be free DLC as well. So yeah, as we know, Resident Evil Village is one of the bigger launch titles that's going to be there for PSVR 2, but this is something that I feel like a lot of people have been waiting to hear more about, that being Resident Evil 4's VR mode. It was announced that it would have a VR mode, but we really didn't hear anything since then. Now they're saying that it has begun development, and to stay tuned for updates, and it will be free DLC. So we might have to wait a little while for it, but still, I think most people just want to make sure that they do it right. And who knows, maybe we'll see a little bit of it during tomorrow's State of Play. But that's the update I have for you for RE4's VR mode. Moving on from that, we're talking a little bit more about the whole thing going on between Sony and Microsoft and the Activision Blizzard deal. We have some interesting things to talk about. First, I have an article here from Push Square where the title reads, Xbox Series X and S is getting trounced by PS5, Microsoft weirdly reveals. They say the funniest thing about the never-ending Activision Blizzard acquisition saga is how it's prompted tech giants Microsoft and Sony to undermine their own businesses. Case in point, during a media briefing in Brussels earlier today, the Redmond firm proudly declared that Xbox has a global market share of just 30% compared to PlayStation's vastly superior 70%. Nintendo apparently doesn't exist. Microsoft didn't stop there with the cold hard numbers. It said in Europe, the split is 80-20 in Sony's favor, and it added that the PS5 outsold the Xbox Series X and S by a ratio of 69-31 towards the tail end of last year. Given how unbelievably aggressive Sony has been with its marketing in 2023 thus far, we can only imagine that gap is continuing to increase. The Xbox maker appears to believe that by sharing these numbers, regulators will take a sympathetic view of the trillion-dollar firm and pass its proposed $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard. But we would argue that Sony's success is built on decades of consistent quality, great global localization, and massive worldwide advertising campaigns. No one is stopping Microsoft from capturing a bigger piece of the pie, but apparently it doesn't want to put in the hard yards. So obviously you can tell there's a little bit of snark here coming from Push Square. But, I wanted to read this article because I am in agreement. And we have another article here that comes from PlayStation Lifestyle, which I definitely want to talk about, where the title reads, Microsoft accuses Sony of protecting two-decade dominance in market share. They say Brad Smith, president and vice chair of Microsoft, has said in an interview that Activision Blizzard has accused Sony for trying to protect, quote, its two-decade dominance in video games, end quote. Smith also claims that PlayStation has a 70-30 market share compared to Xbox on a global scale, and these figures are even stronger for Sony in Europe and Japan, as we just discussed. But this is the exact quote. It says, think about the market in Europe. It is a market where Sony has an 80% share, Globally, it is about 70-30. In Japan, it's 96-4. These numbers have been remarkably steady for 2 decades. Even last year, when there was issues with Sony's supply chain, they came back strong. So, look, this is kind of par for the course, I would say. We're seeing Microsoft do that thing again, where they're basically throwing their own brand under the bus and making themselves seem, frankly, like losers. And, the whole thing about this is I'm not surprised to see Microsoft doing that, right? Like, they're trying to get this to be pushed through, so they're going to say whatever they need to say and make themselves look however they need to look in order to convince regulators. We all know this, but what blows my mind is the fact that, we're hearing things such as, Sony, they're trying to protect their 2-decade dominance in market share. Like, they're framing this, as well as, convincing other people who are onlookers and giving their opinions on this situation, to also try to convince people that there's somehow something wrong with this. It's extremely bizarre. Like, you're telling me that a company that has spent 2 decades making their way to the top, doing a lot of great things, I would say, along the way. I'm not saying it's been perfect. I'm not saying Sony never had to get their hands dirty, so to speak. We know that business is business. But I think by this point in time, we can all agree that Sony has, to an extent, earned their way to the top. They've done a great job building their studios, building their portfolio. And that's why I kind of mentioned that last Push Square article, because I agree with what they said at the end there. You're telling me that the right thing for them to do, or the expected thing for them to do, is to just turn to a company like Microsoft, who was just straight up beaten at the console market game, and to just say, oh, okay, you want to start buying up some of the biggest publishers in the industry and taking multi-platform games, fine, yeah, go ahead, we have no problem with that, we're on board with that. It makes literally no sense, and it blows my mind that people basically want to demonize Sony for doing what any company would do in their position, which is try to defend their position, to defend their market share. Yes, to look at Microsoft and the amount of money they're willing to spend as a threat and try to do anything they can to stop that. Like, it's just as it makes sense for Microsoft to be downplaying themselves and making themselves look weak, it makes total sense for Sony to be trying to protect their position right now. So, yeah, I just wanted to point this out because, this is just more of what we're beginning to hear, where I get it, it's all about the optics. Some people look at Sony and they think that Sony is just as bad. And you look at what Sony did in the past to, like Sega and whatnot, and at times Nintendo, to get to the top. And it's like, look, I get that. As I said, I'm not saying Sony's hands are clean here entirely, but it's just kind of absurd to me that we're reaching a point where we're actually trying to look at Sony securing some exclusivity deals over the years, right? Or, buying studios in their early stages and building them up. It's absurd to me that we're actually still trying to compare that to Microsoft buying one of the biggest independent video game publishers in the industry for nearly $70 billion. They are simply not comparable, and anybody who attempts to compare them, in my opinion, simply does not know what's going on here and just simply does not understand the scale, and certainly cannot understand the long-term implications because of that. So, yeah, I just thought that this was interesting. We're going to have to see if Microsoft ends up convincing the EU regulators to make this go through. Some people who have been following this are saying that this may have been enough for them to push it through. And we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. But some of the stuff that's being said and some of the, some of the stuff that's being pushed here is just frankly baffling. But you guys let me know your thoughts on that. I'm going to move on to the final set of topics, which talks about tomorrow's State of Play, which I will remind you, I will be live streaming here on the channel. So hopefully you'll come and hang out with me. First, I want to give you a small update. I was speculating yesterday how long the State of Play would be, knowing that there's going to be, some new VR2 games, as well as a 15-minute demo of, Rocksteady's next game. But now we have official confirmation from the Japanese version of the PlayStation blog that this state of play is going to be 45 minutes. So that's quite a long state of play, honestly. That means that we're going to get 30 minutes of indie and third-party games, and the last 15 minutes, I would assume, are going to be dedicated to Rocksteady's game. So, yeah, I wanted to just give you that small update, but the final thing here I want to cover is an article that comes from PlayStation Lifestyle where it says Metal Gear Solid fans are now speculating a state of play announcement. It says here, fans are speculating a Metal Gear Solid State of Play announcement on Thursday, February 23rd. Rumors of a Metal Gear Solid remake for PS5 have been swirling since late last year, and there have been multiple other MGS reports, many of which have led to dead ends thus far. So why do fans have their hopes up again? The source of the latest speculation seems to be a tweet by journalist Andy Robinson, as well as an article from January, both of which are making the rounds on Reddit. The article in question talks about a Metal Gear Solid collection of sorts releasing soon, which fans have somehow linked to the state of play, as far as Robinson's tweet is concerned. In responding to someone who asked him about his previous Metal Gear Solid reports, Robinson asked followers to watch his podcast on Thursday, and it just so happens that there's a state of play tomorrow. To be fair to MGS fans, Konami did end up reviving Silent Hill after years and years of rumors, so there's a chance that Metal Gear Solid will get the same treatment. Could Metal Gear Solid be part of the third-party reveals tomorrow? Well, here's the thing. This article that they're referring to about a collection, yeah, this comes from, I think, Gamer Ranks or something like that. So I don't know like how accurate that is. That's not really what I'm focused on. The thing that interests me the most is what Andy Robinson tweeted when somebody asked him straight up about, any updates on the Metal Gear Solid reports. It's worth noting, Andy Robinson is from VGC, and he was the one who wrote up the VGC report where they heard, information internally that Konami was planning or is planning to release some Metal Gear Solid remasters, possibly a collection, before they properly announced the full-blown Metal Gear Solid remake. Now, his response to this person asking of an update, basically saying, tune into our podcast, which is happening the same day as the state of play, to me, this means one of two things. Number one, it means that something is going to be announced tomorrow related to Metal Gear Solid, which I'll lose my mind if it happens. I'm not getting my hopes up, but it either means that, and they're going to talk about it on the podcast, and so it's an easy way for him to plug his own podcast. Or number two, the announcement might not happen at the state of play, but he will maybe give us some more inside information about what's going on with Metal Gear Solid. Because clearly people are going to have questions if, after all this time with all these rumors and even Konami seemingly teasing it, we get another state of play and nothing shows up. Maybe we'll get an update from Andy Robinson on it. So either way, I think this is something we might want to pay attention to. But yeah, obviously, people are always getting their hopes up for state of plays every time they happen. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not going into tomorrow's state of play with high hopes. I'm not going in expecting anything Metal Gear Solid related. If we get that, oh man, that would be absolutely incredible. But I'm not expecting it. But hopefully, because of what Andy Robinson tweeted as a response to this person, maybe we'll get a little update to find out what's going on with these games. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. If you did, leave it a like, subscribe if you're new, hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share the video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.